I never thought a job could change the way people look at you, not because it was illegal, not because it was shameful, but because it wasn't impressive enough for them. I worked hard, long hours, dirty hands, no applause, no titles, just honest work that paid the bills and kept food on the table. But every time my family talked about success, my name quietly disappeared from the room. At family gatherings, they'd ask each other about promotions, bonuses, new offices and future plans. When the conversation reached me, it always ended the same way. An awkward pause, a forced smile. Then someone would joke, "So, still doing that job?" They laughed like it was harmless, like words don't stick, like humiliation evaporates once the table is cleared, but it didn't. It followed me home. It sat with me in silence. It reminded me exactly where I stood in their eyes. My cousins wore suits. My siblings chased titles. I showed up tired, smelling like work, pretending I didn't notice how quickly the topic changed when I spoke. I learned to talk less, to smile more, to shrink myself so others could feel bigger. They mocked me openly sometimes, subtly other times. Jokes about how I'd finally make something of myself one day. Comments about how I should have studied harder. Remarks about how my job was something you do temporarily, not for life. What hurt the most wasn't strangers judging me. It was family, people who knew how hard I worked, people who knew I never asked them for anything. And yet, they treated me like a cautionary tale instead of a person. I told myself it didn't matter. That respect comes from within, that I didn't need their approval. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to survive disappointment. The truth is, being looked down on by your own people cuts deeper than any insult from the outside. Still, I kept going. I showed up every day. I learned things most people never bothered to understand. I handled problems others didn't even know existed. I became good at what I did, quietly, without validation, without praise. Years passed like this. The jokes never stopped. The mockery just became routine. My job was the punchline. My life was the example of what not to become. Then one day everything changed. It wasn't dramatic at first. No warning, no big announcement. Just a phone call that came earlier than usual. A voice on the other end that didn't sound confident anymore. A voice that didn't laugh. They needed help. At first, I thought it was a mistake. People like them don't call people like me when things are going well. They call when something is wrong, very wrong. I listened quietly as the story unfolded. The same people who mocked my work were suddenly stuck, panicking, running out of options. And the solution they desperately needed was the exact thing they had laughed at for years. For the first time, they weren't looking down at me. They were looking to me. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Karma doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as silence on the other end of the phone, waiting for you to decide what kind of person you are. Because what happened next would change our relationship forever. And they had no idea what they were about to ask from the one person they never respected. When they finally said what they needed, the room around me felt smaller. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, just to make sure I had heard it right. The job they had mocked for years was suddenly the only thing standing between them and a disaster they couldn't fix on their own. They explained it in pieces, like they were embarrassed to admit how bad things had gotten. A mistake had been made, a system had failed, deadlines were missed, money was bleeding out faster than anyone expected. And now everyone was pointing fingers, asking how something so simple could have gone so wrong. I didn't interrupt. I let them talk. I let them reveal just how little they understood about the work they had laughed at. They spoke with confidence at first, trying to sound like they were still in control. But their words started to crack as reality set in. The truth was they were out of options. Then came the shift in tone. The jokes disappeared. The sarcasm vanished. The same voice that once teased me now sounded careful, almost respectful. They asked if I could take a look at the situation, as if it were a small favor instead of the lifeline it really was. I felt something rise in my chest, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Not anger, not revenge, validation, the quiet kind that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. For the first time, my work wasn't invisible. It mattered. They told me I was their last hope, that everyone else had failed, that time was running out. They said my name differently now, slower, like it carried weight, and that alone said more than any apology ever could. I asked a few questions, careful, professional, calm. Their answers were scattered. They didn't have details. They didn't understand the full scope of the problem. They just knew things were falling apart, and I was the only one who might know how to stop it. When I finally said I would come and look, the relief on the other end of the line was obvious. They thanked me quickly, nervously, like they were afraid I might change my mind if they said the wrong thing. As I hung up, I sat there in silence. I thought about every joke, every sideways glance, every moment they made me feel small. I thought about how easily they had dismissed years of hard work. And now, without realizing it, they had placed all their trust in the very thing they once mocked. I didn't feel proud, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt something heavier, a decision forming, because helping them wasn't just about fixing a problem, it was about deciding whether respect earned too late still counts. And I knew that whatever choice I made next would reveal more about them than it ever would about me. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different from anything I remembered. The same people who once joked about my job were tense, quiet, and constantly checking their phones. The confidence they used to wear so easily was gone, replaced by urgency they couldn't hide. They walked me through the situation, explaining it like they were hoping I wouldn't notice the gaps. Important steps had been skipped. Warnings had been ignored. Shortcuts were taken because they believed the work was simple, something anyone could handle. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became how badly they had underestimated what I did for a living. I asked direct questions, the kind that require real understanding to answer. Each one made the room quieter. They exchanged looks, hoping someone else would speak first. That was the moment it fully hit them. They weren't dealing with a small issue. They were facing the consequences of years of arrogance. As I worked, I could feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. The same hands that once waved me off now hovered nearby, nervous, unsure when to interrupt. They stopped laughing altogether. Every sound in the room felt heavier, like they were afraid to disturb whatever fragile chance they had left. Someone finally said it out loud. They admitted they never took my job seriously, that they thought it was easy, temporary, something beneath them. The words came out quietly, but they landed hard. Not because they were shocking, but because they were honest. I didn't respond right away. I focused on the work, on stabilizing what I could, on explaining slowly what needed to be done and how much time had already been wasted. Their faces changed as they realized this wasn't a quick fix. It was going to cost them money, reputation, pride. They started asking for reassurance, asking if everything would be okay, asking if I could stay longer, if I could prioritize their problem over everything else. The same people who once treated my work like a joke now needed more of it than they could afford. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I saw how quickly respect appears when people need you, how fast mockery turns into dependence. And I understood that this wasn't just about fixing a problem. It was about power and who actually holds it when things fall apart. They were waiting for me to save them. And for the first time, I realized they had no idea how close they were to losing everything they once used to look down on me for. As the hours passed, the pressure in the room kept building. Every small update I gave carried more weight than it should have, and every pause felt dangerous. They hovered near me now, careful with their words, careful with their tone, like respect was something fragile they could break again if they weren't careful. They started apologizing, but not all at once. It came in fragments. Someone said they never meant the jokes personally. Someone else said they were just messing around. Another admitted they didn't understand my work and assumed it wasn't important. None of it sounded like accountability. It sounded like fear wrapped in excuses. Then came the requests. Could I stay late? Could I cancel other plans? Could I put their emergency ahead of everything else? They spoke as if my time was suddenly priceless, even though it had been treated as disposable for years. Every favor they asked felt heavier than the last. I realized something uncomfortable in that moment. They didn't respect me more because they understood my work now. They respected me because they were dependent on it. And dependence can disappear the second the crisis is over. I told them exactly what needed to be done. I explained the risks they were facing, the mistakes that led them here, and the effort it would take to fix even part of the damage. There was no sugarcoating, no shortcuts, just reality. The same reality they had ignored when it didn't affect them. Silence followed. Not the mocking kind I was used to, but the kind that comes when people finally understand how serious the situation is. They nodded, they agreed, they listened. And for the first time, I could see regret on their faces. Not because they hurt me, but because they finally understood the cost of underestimating someone. As I worked, I kept thinking about what would happen when this was over, when the crisis passed, when they no longer needed me. Would the respect stay, or would the jokes quietly return? That question mattered more than whether the problem could be fixed, because helping them now wasn't just about skill or effort. It was about deciding if I was willing to step back into a role where my value only existed during emergencies. And I knew the next decision I made would determine whether this was a turning point or just another temporary pause before things went back to the way they were. By the time the situation was finally under control, the relief in the room was obvious. Phones stopped ringing, voices lowered, shoulders relaxed. The crisis that had brought them to me was no longer hanging over their heads, and just like that, I could feel the balance shifting again. They thanked me, repeatedly. Some were sincere, some were awkward. A few tried to laugh as if humor could smooth over years of disrespect. They talked about how lucky they were that I had been there, how things could have gone so wrong without me. And in those words, I heard what was missing just as clearly as what was said. No one talked about the past. No one mentioned the jokes. No one acknowledged how small they had made me feel when my work didn't benefit them. The gratitude was real, but it was temporary, tied to the problem I had just solved. That's when I understood the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't redemption. This was convenience. They didn't suddenly value my job. They valued the outcome it gave them. And once that outcome was secured, the reason for their respect would quietly disappear with it. I set my boundary calmly, professionally. I told them what I was willing to do going forward and what I wasn't. I made it clear that my time, my skills, and my work were not favors to be mocked when things were easy and demanded when things fell apart. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different. Some nodded, some looked uncomfortable. A few didn't like it at all, but none of them laughed, because for the first time they understood that access to me was no longer automatic. I left that day without anger, without satisfaction, without the need to prove anything further. Karma didn't punish them loudly. It taught them quietly. It showed them that the person they dismissed was the one holding things together when everything started to fall apart. They mocked my job until they needed me. And when they did, they learned a lesson they couldn't joke away. Respect that only appears in desperation is not respect at all. The real karma wasn't that they needed me. It was that once they did, they could never look at me the same way again, and neither could I. An ancient scholar would judge this without anger because anger clouds truth. Those who mocked honest work believed comfort was permanent. They laughed because life had not yet tested them. Wisdom knows that stability is fragile, and when it breaks, arrogance is the first thing to disappear. The judgment is clear. Respect that arrives only in desperation is not respect. It is fear, fear of failure, fear of exposure, fear of losing control. You were never proven valuable when they needed you. You were already valuable when they dismissed you. Crisis did not raise your worth. It revealed their ignorance. Karma did not punish them loudly. It taught them quietly. It forced them to depend on the very thing they once ridiculed. And dependence is the most honest apology a person can offer. Remember this. The wise do not chase validation from those who laugh at them. They wait, because time has a way of turning mockery into silence. If this judgment felt familiar, you already understand its truth. Like the video, if you believe respect should come before need. Subscribe if you want more modern stories judged through ancient wisdom.